Hello everyone, and welcome to this video, which is in our When They Were Young series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and in this video we're taking a look at an absolutely unbelievable game played between AlphaZero and Stockfish all the way back in TCEC Season 14 SuperFinal, the first SuperFinal that Leela ever played in. And this is game 85. Now the opening it features is a wonderful, creative queen for two minor pieces sacrifice that 1951 World Championship candidate David Bronstein came up with all those years ago. And I got triggered about it because my bookmaker colleague Jeroen chose this opening for the TCEC Season 22 SuperFinal. Well, that was a rather depressing experience for Black, but one of the Stockfish developers brought up this game, and yeah, I think this really gives a much better idea of what David Bronstein was aiming for when he came up with this sack. So how does it come about? We get d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, f3, a Samisch King's Indian. And then after bishop e3, Black plays the old main line with e5. Modern play is much more with c5 ideas. And after e5, d5, Bronstein's idea is to go knight h5, queen d2, queen h4 check. And it looks suicidal because after g3, knight takes g3, you've got queen f2. And the knight on g3 is pinned to the queen on h4. But there's this idea, knight takes f1, queen takes h4, knight e3. And because of the threatened fork on c2 of the king on e1 and rook on a1, Black will also pick up the c4 pawn as well. Now, in the Season 22 SuperFinal, Stockfish played actually quite an unusual way, really. It went queen f2, knight c4, b3, knight b6, queen d2. And the important thing about this was that this queen is actually attacking the d6 pawn. So c6 can just be met by d takes c6, and well, the d6 pawn will go. Black's other break f5. Yeah, you can do that, but the Black king side's a little bit bereft of defensive pieces, and a quick h4 to h5 will be very dangerous. In the game, Komodo played it really passively, actually. Played bishop d7, knight e2, a5, knight g3, knight c8, knight c2, b6, and basically just tried to hold its position, but well, it wasn't successful. I mean, Stockfish made it look much easier than it is, but just piling on the c-file, advancing on the queen side, that won the day in the end. However, this is back to Season 14. We got much more exciting stuff. Leela probably wasn't as good as it is now at keeping control of positions. So it played king e2, knight c4, and now a very unusual move. Played the move queen e1. And actually this doesn't really hit the spot in terms of stopping Black's counterplay. And Stockfish reacted straight away with f5. h4 played, of course, that's what you expect from Leela, and now takes, and c6. And this is the key point, really. You know, in the Season 22 game, Stockfish was very careful, well, to chase away this knight early, and also to get a queen on the d-file to attack the d6 pawn. Also, the king was, I guess, slightly safer on e1 than on e2. Here, for example, if you go dc6, we've got knight c6, and we're coming in with knight d4 check. So somehow the white pieces are just a little bit awkward, and that's going to give Black some counterplay. Now, you know, playing through the game, I sort of assumed that Stockfish built up a big advantage pretty quickly. But actually, you know, looking at it through modern engines, played a lot of games of my own between Koivisto 8.6 and Stockfish, the version playing in the SuperFinal, and a lot of draws, basically. You know, this is still quite balanced, although I do really feel I'd rather be Black here because, well, with this king weak, this pawn weak, the rook active, just sort of feels, you know, I could make a mistake more easily with white than with Black. But queen d1 played, bishop d7, king f2, getting out of the way. An alternative line was to play knight g5 here, just to try and get in knight e6, and basically try and get Black's two bishops, basically, and leave that Black, at least without that area of compensation. So king f2, bishop f5, knight g3, knight b2, and well, Leela starts leaking pawns, and well, doesn't sound too bad to start. Still got the queen, of course, but well, you'll see why. You'll see a little bit later why this is so crucial. Queen b3, knight d3 check. King g2, knight c5, queen d1. I mean, really, with this whole maneuver, Leela hasn't gained very much, really, and Black's just gained a pawn and moved the knight from c4 to c5. So, but still the position is about balanced. Bishop d7, h5. Still not easy for Black to get all the queenside pieces developed, and of course this d6 pawn is still a little bit weak. The only question is that if dc6, I get the bishop to c6 now, and then I'm attacking f3, so probably losing this pawn is not so terrible. But this h4 to h5 pressure on the king's side is annoying. Knight ba6, rook c1 and rook f6, and Black's kind of completed the development nicely there. The rook's going to come into f8 and the pawn on f3 is going to be weak. But it's still, as you can see, it's not easy for the black pieces to get at white, really. White's still got some sort of control, and long term, obviously the queen's can be an enormously big influence there. So knight e2 played, rook f8, h6 from Leela. That's where we first saw it. Well, Leela just putting up a thorn pawn close to the black king. Bishop to h8, and rook to f1. Yeah, my engines were preferring rook to c3, just leaving this rook to defend this pawn, which is, not silly at all. And then we were getting knight c7 takes, bishop c6, knight e4. And I think if knight e4, we were going to play rook c6. Just a very common idea when you've got when you've got the rook for pieces, basically. To just try and wreck the opponent's position. By giving up the rook for minor pieces. Rook f7, rook e1, knight e6. King h2. Yeah, I mean, I'd feel very uncomfortable as white, but my engines still seem to think that it's okay. So g5 played, and this is the slight drawback to playing rook f1. The rook's now able to attack h6. King g1. I mean, white always quite happy to offer exchanges, and black doesn't really want to do that. Black wants to keep as many of its minor pieces and rooks on, because as the board gets emptier, the white queen will get more and more powerful. Whilst the board's quite full, the queen doesn't have that same sort of scope. So king g1 played, rook h6, Leela leaking another pawn, knight e4, rook f7, knight to c3, and what Leela's achieved by giving up this pawn is that I guess the coordination of black's rooks has been weakened somehow, no longer targeting f3. This rook can't get back, and the white knights have been activated, so you've given up another pawn for compensation. However, black's now got 7 pawns, white's got just 3, so it's 2 bishops and 4 pawns now for the queen. That's getting to be quite serious. Rook to g6 played, d takes c6, bishop takes c6, rook c2, and yeah, I mean, d takes c6 activates the bishop, pointing towards the white king. On the other hand, the white queen does start to spy some squares, and of course, the knight starts to spy some squares as well, something like d5. Bishop g7, rook d2, and there's also this target of the d6 pawn. Bishop f8, knight takes d6, and now it starts getting really sharp. Rook f4. So yeah, I mean, already actually, black's got ideas like rook h6, rook here, and taking this d6 pawn, principle, it's a pawn, so you're always happy to take it with white, but it's also opened up this diagonal, so the bishop now can get to c5 and inconvenience the king, and combined with a bishop attacking f3, possibilities of g4. I mean, in time trouble, I would just lose this as a baby with white, I'm pretty convinced. So knight e2, and now it gets really great. We get bishop a4, so chasing the queen away from the defense of the rook, queen e1, and bishop takes d6. And yeah, black wins 2 knights for the rook, which leaves us with this material balance, which is 4 minor pieces for queen and rook, In actual fact, 4 minor pieces and 3 pawns for queen and rook. I have truly never seen a material balance like this before. The question is, who is this good for? It really depends, actually, how able is white to give up a rook for a minor piece and then invade with its queen and then its remaining major piece. If black can keep the white pieces, the right rooks at bay, I mean, there's quite a few open lines here, so it doesn't look that easy. But if black can do that, then that clump of minor pieces is really going to do a lot of damage. But for the moment, it's not clear. Actually, the position is still equal, amazingly enough. I think the key point is that the black pieces are in the wrong place. I mean, they're in the queen side, and what you really want is the king side, either attacking the white king or defending the black king. And until that really happens, until you can mobilize those pieces, white's still going to have chances. So bishop c7 was played because white was actually threatening rook d6 and queen e5, which would be quite unpleasant. So bishop c7. Rook h2. This was kind of the moment where it started to go wrong for Leela. After that, the evaluations start getting tricky. This was what both Koivisto and Stockfish wanted to do, and still full of draws here. Knight e6, rook g1, bishop c6, queen e7 is quite similar to what happens in the game, but just somehow just a little bit more active. In particular, this rook stays more active than where it was. Check, king h2. Knight f8, rook c2, bishop c6, rook g5. I mean, this is totally bananas. But the key thing that white's managed here, and don't quite ask me how, is that we still managed to keep 3 pieces on the queen side, and black's pieces are still quite tied down. It's still not obvious how these pieces are going to get over to the king side. So, yeah, it's there's definitely some challenges still for black. I mean, this was how it continued. F3, king h1, just getting out of any discovered attacks. Rook f3 would allow e4 check. After king h1, we're threatening rook f3. Bishop c6, and now takes. The normal wrecking thing. Give up a rook for a bishop, because the 2 knights are always less good, especially against the queen. They find it hard to deal with that. A4, and e4, bishop b6 was played. Oh, this was quite funny. E4, a5, f2, king g2, takes, knight g6, queen g4, and well, with all these threats like queen e6 check, queen c8, queen e4, queen c6, white managed to draw this as well, but quite fraught. I mean, I think obviously it's on the fraught side now of a draw. Rook h2 was played by Leela. Knight d7, rook g1, bishop c6, and what you notice the difference between this and the Stockfish Koivisto games I was showing was that there's no real impediment here to these pieces getting back. I mean, we're already looking at knight c5 to e6, we're attacking f3 as well, so it's really black's on the way to consolidating here. Takes, queen h4. Yeah, we've got some checks coming in. Maybe, pardon me, some queen h8, rook h7s. But I mean, actually, the king can always run, and well, if it runs to the queen side, then it's running towards its pieces. But in actual fact, black doesn't even give that to Leela, because we get check, bishop b6 check, and then bishop h5, blocking the h file. But queen e7 comes in, and knight ac5, and well, you see that black's pieces are starting to converge over to the king side, and the key thing is really, I mean, the queen is sort of active, but on its own it's not going to be able to give a perpetual. There's too many there's coverage of too many squares to do that, and the key problem is how on earth do you get this rook on h2 active. In the lines between Stockfish Koivisto that we saw, this rook was getting more active. It was sacking itself for staff or getting over to the king side, switching from king side to queen side, but here it's really just blocked everywhere. So rook f2 was played, rather passive move there. Knight f8, queen takes e5, knight f e6. I mean, this is what Stockfish does really well.
I think I would have been very upset about giving up a lovely central pawn like that. But this manoeuvre of this transfer of the knight from d7 to e6, it gives black the possibility of playing bishop c7 and then this very important move b6, when the knight on c5 is solid, protected by a pawn. It's a real outpost, and that then frees the other knight and also this bishop to become active. So, it's lovely play. It's really beautiful play here. So a4, of course, that's white's one chance to destabilize anything that black set up on the queen side. This move a5 somewhere. So bishop c7, queen d5, bishop g4. This bishop's going to give maybe an annoying little check, or maybe go bishop f5. H5 is not a bad square, but bishop f5 covers squares like e4 and d3, really gives this knight some potential afterwards, to come in here or here. So rook c2, bishop h3 check, and then b6. That's the move we wanted. Of course, queen a8 check takes a7 is going to be possible, and then white's going to have a5, so white does have some possibilities to destabilize this. But what you're hoping for is, by the time white's played those three moves, black's going to be able to have moved on to the next attacking structure. I mean, I have to say, I don't know whether you've ever played shogi, Japanese chess, but in that game, there are two very powerful pieces, the rook and the bishop. There's no queen in shogi, and then there are sort of tiny little pieces called generals, silver generals and gold generals. That the amazing thing in shogi is that very often a clump of those tiny little generals, pieces which are much less powerful than the opponent's rook and bishop, they can often prove to be so amazing coordinating together, whereas the rook and bishop are struggling to get active. And well, this is what you're seeing here. I've never seen it in chess before. But, or not to this extent, but, well, we're going to see a few games where this is just shown in an amazing fashion. So queen a8 check, king f7, queen takes a7, and now, well, some of the Stockfish Koivisto games that I was playing were absolutely beautiful, and I have to say that Koivisto was doing an amazing job. Take a look at this one. In the game, Stockfish played king f6, which was very strong, but this game was Koivisto, bishop f5, rook c3, king f6, queen a8, bishop d6, king e1, bishop e4. What I really like here is how coordinated the black pieces are. And the queen and rook are constantly setting up a new series of checks, but every time, the minor pieces are covering here. So we force these checks, queen and rook, the king's been chased, but now there's no more checks anymore. So a5 takes rook a3, white trying to open up some lines, a4, queen h3, check, king f6, rook c3, bishop f5, queen h6, knight g5, and look at this lovely, this lovely spread of pieces all across the board. Queen h2, knight c4, rook d3, bishop e6, queen b2, king f5. All those minor pieces are staying very close together, and just really, keeping the white pieces at bay so beautifully. King d1, king g4, king c2, a3. Rook d1, f3. It's like Space Invaders. You just can't stop these pawns landing. Queen e2, queen e8, a2, queen a4, f2, king d3, bishop e7, and yeah, so amazing to see the two most powerful pieces on the board just so helpless against just this gathering of small pieces. And well, queen d1, king g2, and the game just didn't last much longer. But really, I saw this and just burst out laughing when I saw it. Yeah, just amazing, really. And, well, what Stockfish does in the game is also very nice. King f6, a5, bishop f5, hitting the rook again. Rook takes c5, played by Leela. B takes c5. So Leela gets a passed a pawn, and well, seems to be have some chances here, but well, this passed f pawn, which is going to get supported by the black minor pieces, is just going to be too strong. And of course, the big problem is that the white king is caught there, so there's either going to be checkmate threats, or you're going to be moving that pawn on with gain of tempo. So queen h8 check, king g5, a6, bishop g3, a7. And now bishop f5, and this is the big problem, of course. If you go a8 queen, then there's bishop d3, and then f2 check, and we're going to get mate very, very quickly. So after bishop f5, queen h1 was played by Leela, check, king g1, knight d4, Again, all sorts of horrific threats with knight e2. For example, if I go a8 queen, I can go knight e2 check, king there, knight f4 check, king g1 and f2 checkmate. Again, very lovely. So Leela decided to give up its queen finally, but after takes, king f4, oh no takes rather, king f4, threatening bishop g3 check here, then the game was adjudicated a win. Of course, you know, black could have gone bishop e4 at any moment just to stop the queening if black particularly cared to. So there we are. What a game. I love that. As I said, you know, I've never seen such a material balance in a chess game before. And yeah, I mean, you know, when it's a position like that is coming from an early queen sacrifice, you know, for queen for 2 bishops and 2 pawns, you know, then well, you're pretty sure that something like this would have really made David Bronstein very proud. And yeah, as I said, never seen a more evocative illustration of what black was aiming for in this opening. Hope you enjoyed that. Well, I'll be doing this series from time to time, you know, looking back at wonderful games. I mean, there have been so many. I mean, the current games are incredible as well, but yeah, some of these old favourites are fantastic. Hope you enjoyed that. If you enjoyed it, why not give a like or subscribe to the channel. Take a look at my new book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, which has got loads of amazing stuff just like this. And otherwise, you know, thanks very much for watching and hope to see you at the next video. Thanks for watching.